Hi, welcome to the SP podcast. In today's episode, we are speaking to William Fraser-Gray, an NCAA athlete from the UK who tells us his story about moving to the States, playing competitive football, and suffering a potentially life-changing injury. It's a fascinating story, and I hope you enjoy. So, before we get started on your kind of career and your story, which is a fascinating one, I think a good place to start would be, how did you end up going to America for university? What was that process like for you?
Sure. So played for various footy academies growing up, sort of youth age groups. Played for Liverpool for a year, and then Preston North End until I was 16. Got a scholarship there, but I'd had a couple of injuries the season before, and I kind of just made the decision to stay in school because I'd heard we had a family friend who had a company basically sending young athletes out for football to America. So I got to explain the whole process of how the universities can give you scholarship money to basically play your sport. So finished my A-levels, took a gap year to work just to save up some money. And basically the process was fairly straightforward. And you can do it on your own, which is more work. Obviously, you have to do everything yourself or with your parents. I went through a company which they basically put all your highlights together, make like a player profile, and then send it to various coaches. And so you can do all this yourself if you don't have the money to pay like I think it's like 1 to 2.5K, depending on which company you go with. And if you can get all the film together and your highlights, and every single coach, more or less in America, whatever sport it is, if you type in, for example, Clemson, big Division I university, if you type in Clemson men's soccer, go to the website and click on the coaches page, they have their mobile number and email. So if you've got the time to go through hundreds and hundreds of schools and compile a list of emails, there's nothing to say that you can't do it yourself. But we went through a company who basically did everything for us. The next couple of months is basically speaking to coaches that are interested over FaceTime, because obviously they want to get like a decent grasp of who you are as a person, kind of mentality, attitude, because you can only learn so much from, like, especially in football, my sport. I suppose it's a bit different in like golf, swimming, where it's purely like statistical. You can tell how good someone is off times. A little bit harder when it's just you can make yourself look as good or as bad as you want in a highlight video. And so, you have those calls, and then my process was just I picked the university. Maybe it wasn't in the best location, but I got along with the coach the best. He spoke to me and my parents really well and made me feel wanted. So that was where I chose to go. I ended up in the middle of nowhere in Georgia, about an hour and a half away from Atlanta. So small Christian university of 1,000 students, an hour and a half away from a big city. It was definitely a culture shock moving from Lancaster. Not saying Lancaster's a huge city, but it was one day it was so surreal. Even when we had everything signed and the flights booked, I didn't believe it was going to happen until I landed in America, and I was like, okay, I'm actually here now. Like, I guess this is happening.
I think that's an interesting thing, right? So my next question is, you obviously always potential offers and coaches speaking to you from all over the States. In terms of, I'm guessing you didn't really get an opportunity to go visit any of these places or go visit any of these universities. It's purely down to kind of conversations. So, when you're looking at factors of, location, coaching, division, potentially availability of your position in the team, all these different factors, what was the most important parts for you? I know obviously you said about your location being in Georgia, but was it more the coaching? Was it more the location? Was it more the team and kind of how you'd fit into that team in terms of position, or what was the kind of deciding factor for you?
Yeah, so obviously you've got to take everything into consideration, and when you get in sort of, I think in my case, I must have had about 10 to 15 coaches reach out to me. So then you get that first email off the coach, and there's even things that you wouldn't think of. Like, I would type the the team in on Instagram, for example, and I would go and look at like social media presence and see if they have one, if they've got videos showing like the training and stuff. And for me, the biggest thing was the coach when it came down to it. I would always, my advice, one of my main pieces of advice for anyone going to America and like deciding what university to go to, I would say location is maybe the least important factor, just because when you're in season and when you're training, all that really matters is, okay, how much you get along with the coach. Usually before you even commit, he or she will put you in touch with like current players, so they can give you a decent insight into, okay, how's training, how's the team, how's the location. And because we were in I had my doubts going into this university because it was so secluded and so small and stuff like that. I mean, the town had a McDonald's, a Subway, a Pizza Hut, a couple of small family-owned restaurants. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I frequented all three, but the fact that we were together every day, training twice a day, 2 games a week, it was irrelevant where we were because we were in such a tight bubble and like a brotherhood and a family of the program that like really in season we didn't have that much time to get up to any mischief anyway. We didn't really have any opportunity to go and do that much stuff. When you're in season as a student athlete in America, when you factored in training twice a day, 2 games a week, and then you've got your university courses, 4 or 5 classes a week on top of that, the location's not really that relevant now. When spring break comes around, you fly somewhere or you drive somewhere. But yeah, for me, the main thing was, okay, do I get along with the coach? And for me, I'd spoken to 2 of the players, an Irish guy and a Scottish guy, before going out, and they kind of put my mind at ease and they talked it up, and eventually it was the best decision ever. I know I wouldn't have had as good a time at any of the other universities I went to.
No, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? I think when people first think of the idea of going to America, they picture, I want to go live in New York or California or Texas or whatever their vision is. But like you say, sometimes going off to New York or whatever, when money will be far tighter and, you know, the opportunities to travel and stuff are so limited when you're around your course and you're around your kind of competition schedule and season schedule, is the main factor is who you're spending every single day with, be it coaching, support staff, you know, teammates and things like that, because that's going to shape your experience at the end of the day, rather than, you know, where you can go for dinner or what you can do on your day off.
I think managing expectations is big as well, just because like I said, you're basically a professional athlete, in my opinion. You're training so much and you're playing such a high standard now with all the money that the universities had. Probably 75% of my 2 teams that I played for in America for my bachelor's and my master's were mainly European, South American, like from all over the world. So it really is a high standard. And I think I had the expectation when I went in, I was thinking, it's going to be like American Pie or something, and we're going to be partying in like frat houses or sororities like all the time. And that was a little bit of a shock at first, because I'd like built it up in my head to where that's what it was going to be. And then I was like, oh no, I'm actually like in like a professional environment here. Like and then I'm in the middle of nowhere with a school of 1,000 students. Like I think realizing that as many opportunities there are in America to play your sport and get one of these scholarships, the chances are like 1% of you landing at it depends how good you are and depends how good your sort of promotion is in the pre-going out there stage. But the chances of you ending up at a university in slap bang in the middle of a big city or slap bang on the beach, a huge university of 40,000 students, it's quite slim. So chances are you're going to have to at least do 1 or 2 years proving yourself. There is the opportunity to do 1 or 2 years, and then if you do really well, you put up good numbers, then okay, maybe a Division 1 school will come in for you if you're not at a Division 1 school already. I've got my friend Shane played in midfield for my first university. He ended up after, obviously we had not the blessing, but we had COVID that cancelled the season. So we had one added on the end. He went up to Nashville. He lived in slap bang in the middle of Nashville and had a great time. But managing expectations about location specifically is quite big.
I think that kind of leads me into my next question, really, was, obviously you say you lived in the UK your whole life, you played football your whole life in the UK. You then wake up one day and you're in Georgia playing in the States. What was it like those first couple of days when you've just landed, you've moved, you're thousands of miles away from home, you're kind of acclimatizing to a new country, a new way of living, but also a new way of training, the way that coach approaches sport and how American collegiate sport works compared to, British kind of league systems and club systems and stuff. What was it like that first week or two?
Yeah, it was definitely a bit of a shock to the system, and it was definitely, I don't know, I was okay because I'd always placed quite a big emphasis on my fitness, but the main difference for me is that there's way more emphasis on like fitness and athleticism over there rather than you play for like a pro club or a semi-pro club here. The training is very much technical, like focused on technical stuff like possessions, passing patterns, stuff like that. Before we even touched a ball, we had a fitness test at 6 a.m. on like the second or third day we were there, and you couldn't train until you passed the fitness test. I was lucky that to be fair, I put myself through a decent pre-season before I went out, but the running, there's a lot of running and a lot of gym sessions where they have a big focus on being an athlete as much as being a football player, which was like nothing that I'd ever seen before. Like I think maybe in that 16 to 18 period at Preston, when you're on a scholar, I think it probably gets a little bit more focused on that and like more lifting in the gym and stuff. But I didn't do that, so I'd never been like. I kept myself fit with running, but there was some guys in that fitness test that dropped out early doors, and it was like a big shock. Like, this is going to be way harder than we expected it to be coming in. And that was like the big difference. I was like, sheesh, like this could be this pre-season, 35 degrees, 80% humidity in Georgia in summer, like sweltering heat. And then we're training like 3 times a day, tons of fitness. I was like, what have I signed up for here?
So going into kind of that first season, and you've had your kind of first stages of training out in Georgia, how did you feel that kind of training evolved your game, be it the coaching, be it the fitness, be it the kind of different emphasis? How do you feel you changed as a player in that first season compared to what you were like at Preston back in the UK?
I think mentally it changed me a lot, and I knew speaking to the coach beforehand. So I'm a striker, and Danny, the guy who played striker the season before, he'd won like All-American awards and stuff. So I knew I wasn't walking in and just starting every game straight away. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So as a 19-year-old, I knew I was going to be playing against 24, 25-year-olds coming to the end of their career. I knew I was going to be playing with much older guys that I was going to learn a lot from. As much as I learned from the coaching, I learned from the older guys on the team who kind of really did a great job of putting their arm around us as the young guys coming in. Not just with the football stuff, but with, okay, I've lived in America. I moved from Scotland or England to America 5 years ago. Here's a ton of advice that's going to help you in your time here, which I passed on last year as well to the young guys. So that's kind of just how it goes. But in terms of soccer, football, I was kind of 50-50 whether I started or was on the bench that first year, which was kind of a humbling experience because I was like, okay, I'm going to have to work even harder here to improve and to get fitter and stronger to force my way into the team. And at the same time, it was a case of I've not really played on many teams before where I have been on the bench. So how am I going to adapt my game to come off the bench maybe with 10, 20 minutes left. And to be fair, my first year, I scored 2 goals and they were both off the bench and they were both like game-winning goals. So I feel like I did a decent job of adapting my mentality to where it wasn't sulking because I was on the bench every week and going, this isn't for me. I'm probably going to move home and just, I'm glad I tried America, but it was more a case of I had the mentality where, okay, well, if I'm going to be on the bench, but I'm still coming on, I'm still getting playing time. Okay, well, how can I go and impact this game of football to where afterwards the coach goes, he's switched on and he's playing for the team, because at the end of the day, if you're on the bench, you're still a part of the team and you're still going to be that guy, especially as a striker, you're going to be that guy where you could be coming on to save a game, you could be coming on to maybe swing a game in our favour. So mentality was the big change my first year for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a different skill set, isn't it? Being an effective substitute is a skill set in itself. You know, having the same skill set as a striker is fine, but actually coming onto a game, being able to impact it when the game's already at full flow and kind of getting up to speed very, very quickly, going 0 to 100 is kind of a skill in its own right. Rather than kind of building into the game as everyone else does from the first minute, you've kind of got to jump in with 10, 15 to go and try and impact it, while also kind of getting your foot into the game and getting some touches and kind of getting basically warmed up really, while also the clock is quickly running out. If you're getting subbed on, especially like you say, if you're a striker getting subbed on to kind of change the game last couple of minutes, you haven't really got a lot of time to waste. You
don't get that 5-10 minutes that you usually get at the start of a game to sort of amble into it and get a feel for how the defenders are. And I think a big part of that is making sure as a substitute you are watching the game and you're taking everything in, because for example, if you start the game as a striker, you've got like 5-10 minutes while the whole team the game's a little bit slower tempo usually. So so you maybe have like 5-10 minutes to go, okay, I'm going to assess the defenders, I'm going to assess, and maybe get a few touches to get warmed up. As a sub coming on with 10 minutes left, you've got to know maybe which centre-back you're going to target. You don't get the luxury of 2 or 3 touches to get into the game, because you might only get 2 or 3 touches as a striker in that 10 minutes. And it's a case of being, I was listening to, I think it's like the Champions podcast or something, and one of the presenters on there said something like, their favourite quote, something like, the biggest sin in sports is to not be prepared for an opportunity. Yeah. So it's a case of being, as a substitute, you have to be ready to come on and impact the game 100% prepared physically and mentally. Whether you're getting 2 minutes or 60 minutes off the bench, you have to be able to come in, and I'd never had that sort of experience before. I'd really, for most teams that I'd played for in the past, sort of started. So that was an enormous learning curve.
And it makes you grow as an athlete, doesn't it, as well, having those kind of experiences and kind of learning a different part about yourself and about the game that you maybe not have had exposure to when you start every game in the same position. You're number 9 every week, start every game, don't get subbed off. It's a very different experience, and kind of you haven't had the opportunity to develop that side of the game where it's that analytical, watch the game. Okay, when I get my chance, how am I going to impact? Who am I going to target? Where's the hole in the defence? Where's the opportunity going to come from? And being good at the analytics side of the game makes you that better substitute. If you're watching it and kind of finding where the chance may come from, because like you say, games are made up by moments. If you can take your moment when it comes, even if it's the 91st minute of the game, that can win you the match, or that can, tie the game, or whatever it is. I think that's a really, really interesting part. So obviously you've had your first year, and then where do things go from there?
So in the season, I was happy with how the first season went. Scored a couple of big goals. We gelled really well with the rest of the team, and in spring, so from sort of January to April, that's our kind of off season. So it runs. Every sport has this like set semester. We'll train in the week in spring, and we'll I think we play like 4 or 5 games, just friendlies, just to keep ticking over. And a few, usually the lads who are leaving the year after, they don't really play that much in spring because the coach is wanting to sort of get the guys together that are going to be back in the fall semester again, and just more gelling, more pattern play and stuff. So I was getting good minutes in spring and playing well. I was really looking forward to the fall. And then we had, I think there was 7 or 8 of us, had a really big car accident at the end of March in 2019, just after our last spring game. So we drew 0-0. It was a decent game. It was a higher level team than us. Well, I don't know, but they were a decent team. So we drew 0-0, and so our night out was 45 minutes away. So yeah, on the way back from that night out, we got in a pretty big car accident, and I'd fallen asleep in the car. I was drunk, fell asleep in the car, and I hadn't put my seatbelt on. So I ended up outside the car. I'd flown out of one of the windows, either the side or the windscreen. They weren't quite sure. And I was rushed to, luckily there was a first responder quite close. We were in the middle of nowhere, in Georgia. So really sort of rural road. Got rushed to intensive care in Athens, Georgia, which is where we came from the night out. So it was probably about 15 minutes away. And straight away they did emergency surgery to take this half of my skull out. So round about there. And so because the brain was swelling so quickly, it would have sort of pressed onto the inside of my skull and been a very bad end to the story. So the brain kind of swelled out past where the skull would have been. I had an absolute watermelon for a few weeks. Had about 7 surgeries total. So had 2 on my neck. Had ruptured a ligament in my neck. I don't think I broke it, but ligament, so I couldn't hold my head up. Loads of internal bleeding, ruptured liver, spleen, punctured lung. I was like the game Operation. I was like basically that dude. So that was, long story short, I was in hospital in Atlanta in Georgia for best part of 3 months, which obviously meant that I didn't play the next season.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously you're lucky that you're so close or within driving distance of that hospital. In terms of, after you kind of were aware of what had happened, I'm assuming you weren't aware straight away, but once you kind of were informed of what happened, did they expect you to ever play sport again at that point? Or what was the kind of initial thoughts from the doctors when it came to telling you what had happened?
So when I was in a coma, my mum had a conversation with the surgeon, and luckily my mum she's a physio in a hospital, so she knew all of the tubes and stuff coming out of me. She wasn't frantic or anything. She knew what it all was, so she knew I was in a good place. And I think the surgeon said to her, they still said, like, we can't really tell what he's going to be like when he wakes up from this coma. He could be one of a few different outcomes. So at that point, I don't really think anyone knew.
Yeah.
And then when I spoke to him, he said, "Yeah, just keep an open mind about it, because you're going to have to go through a very, very long process to just get back to doing normal day-to-day stuff. So I would hold your horses on thinking about playing sports again."
Yeah.
But I mean, I made a joke in the first hour of waking up. I said to my coach, I said, "I presume I'm not playing next week then," with a squishy head and stuff and a helmet on. So I always had the mentality from the start. I think right at the very start, it was a bit touch and go, just because I think I was speaking without facts. I was saying that I was going to play football again, and I'm not sure if I really believed it and if anyone else believed it, but after sort of 3 weeks after the initial surgeries, I was back. I was teaching myself to walk again on like a Zimmer frame, and I was quite confidently saying there and then, I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to come back and play football. Because I felt like I just had such unfinished business with the sport after the first year that I'd had in America. I thought, if by some miracle they keep me on my scholarship until I'm fit again, I was basically saying they're going to be glad that they kept me on the scholarship, because I'm going to work 10 times harder than everyone else and be 10 times more dedicated, because I've been lucky to survive this. And now, wow, if I get an opportunity to play football again, it's going to be just the most special thing ever.
Yeah, it's tough one, isn't it? Because you've had that first season, you've kind of got used to it, you've broken into the team, you've established yourself, and then it's that second season when you're really wanting to push on. I mean, obviously, such an unfortunate event kind of happens and kind of postpones that moment. You touched upon it there, but what's the situation with kind of scholarships when it comes to injuries and things like that? What was your conversation like with the university, obviously, when they found out that you were going to be kind of sidelined for quite a while?
I was in a fantastic position, and I'm a big believer in like stuff happening for a reason, and a lot. I felt like I was sort of guided a little bit into making my decision which university to go to, but by just everyone that I spoke to, and I ended up there, and it was a Christian university, really small university. So, there's loads of pictures of everyone in the hospital while I was still in that coma and while I was in the initial phases, and the whole university rallied around me. Everyone was sort of praying and stuff. Everyone was using their faith to kind of pray and will my recovery, and I feel like that had a big impact in the recovery anyway, just because of all the stars that aligned that night. But I had a really good relationship with my coach, and I thought I was confident that he was going to sort of fight to keep me on my scholarship, because at the end of the day, it's like professional sports. It's dog eat dog. If they're not going to have me as a player for 2 years, are they going to spend $20,000 a year on scholarship? And so the initial conversation that I had with the coach was basically, I know that I'm not going to be able to play for at least one season, but I'm prepared to help out. I'll be able to walk and stuff, so I'm prepared to pick every single cone up. I can run the social media, I can run the Instagram, and that's what I ended up doing. The university kept me on my scholarship, and I did the social media. I sort of came up with loads of creative stuff for the Instagram, where with a team where a lot of people are from abroad, from Europe and stuff, went down really well, because everyone's parents back home could kind of get more of an insight into what was going on. Day-to-day stuff, not just like match results and stuff, like day-to-day stuff. Like we did photo shoots, video shoots, stuff like that. So essentially I just said to them, I said, like, if you keep me on the scholarship, I will like be worth it in the end. And even while I'm not playing, I'll do everything I can to kind of earn this money. Now I'm not just going to sit around and be the passive observer.
I think that comes back to being like a great bit of coaching, really. Obviously, it sounds like it was quite heavily influenced by the coach, but it's showing that faith in you, where you've got that hunger to really kind of come back, but also it's proven to the team that he cares about you guys. It impacted you in terms of the support he's shown you, but everyone around you would have seen that as well. Every other player would have seen the kind of passion to keep you in the team and to keep you and keep supporting you through this. Every other player goes, actually, this university and this coach really cares about us, not only as athletes, but as people, which I think is such a powerful message to send when you're in a kind of team environment like that, and you've got a coach who, really wants to get the best from his players. They're going to give him so much more if they feel like, that trust and that care is there at the same time. And that value of people, not just as, like you say, scholars who turn up and get paid to play sport 100%. In relation to, universities.
100%. Just because I kind of had the difference in coaches, where the first coach I had was there with me in hospital every day. Him and his family sacrificed so much of pretty much 3 months of their lives, where they were traveling to Athens and then traveling to Atlanta to be in hospital with me and to be with my parents who'd flown out. And that, like, it was life changing for them too. And then after the season that got sort of postponed with COVID, the season after, that coach took a new job at like a close by university, and like me and the new coach, just I won't say anything sort of bad about him, but like we didn't have the same relationship, and he didn't quite treat us the same as the other coach, and didn't quite feel as valued, and the results followed. Whereas then I followed, like I say, with coaching being the most important thing for me, choosing a university, then went to do my masters with the old coach, and the performances were like the best I've ever had. So I just think that choice of coach is like phenomenally important.
100%. You know, coaches shape your whole perception, your whole experience in the sport. So it's, you know, like you say, it's such an important component. So when was the first part when you were really like, I'm going to make a comeback now? You know, you touched upon kind of, you didn't sure if you fully believed it, but it's a good kind of motivator in terms of pushing you through the rehab side. But when was that? Do you remember when that moment was when you're like, I can do this. I'm going to kick a ball. I am going to come back. Do you remember when that moment was?
Yeah. So the second hospital I went to was like a brain and spinal rehab center in Atlanta called the Shepherd Center. Fantastic place, honestly. And that's where they sort of continued to help me to learn how to walk and stuff again. It was basically like on a school rota where I'd wake up at, I don't know, 7, 8 in the morning. There'd be like a rota on my table next to my bed, and it'd be 9 till 10 physical therapy, 11 till 12 occupational therapy, then speech therapy. And I was really lucky, actually. My mum and dad like took a ton of photos and videos of like all the stuff I was doing that I can like look back on. And I remember one of the days my physical therapist said to me, she was like, you're walking pretty good now, like you're pretty close to like, because I had to walk with like a belt on where she held onto the back of it still. Like I still wasn't like fully walking on my own. So like you had to take a test for that. And she was like, oh, you're doing pretty good now. Like, I feel like a few more days and you'll be able to take the test and you might pass it to walk on your own. And she was like, what do you want to do today? Like, is there any like specific type of like walking or movements that you want to do? And I said, have you got a soccer ball? So we like went into the cupboard, and they had like a rubbish little size 3. You know, like if someone asks you to draw a photo of a football, they do like the little white and black hexagons. It was one of those.
Yeah.
And it was like, and it was flat as a pancake. And I said, okay, like we can dribble this down. So I've got a video I'll send you actually where she's holding on to me, and I'm kind of like just still like walking like an old man, really. Because at this point it was probably 5-6 weeks post surgery. I was still pretty unstable. I'd lost like 4 stone of weight through just being on drip feed. But like I'm dribbling the ball down the corridor, and like in that moment I didn't realize that was the point where like my sort of mentality switched from like wishful thinking to this is an actual fact and this is like a goal of mine now to get back.
Yeah.
But like I'll go back through my camera roll and watch that video, and I think I posted it on Facebook, and just like my friends and like family commenting saying, I didn't know your first touch was ever that good. And stuff like that, like people joking and stuff. So that was a cool moment where I was like, yeah, okay. And then like 3 weeks later, I've got videos where I'd passed the test to walk on my own, and like the physical therapist had set up cones in the beautiful garden they had at the hospital, and like dribbling through cones, like still like just walking pace, and still in like, you can see like I'm in a lot of pain still, but it's those moments where I look back and I go, wow, that was 6 weeks after I had like brain surgery and spine surgery. Like how motivated, I don't think I realized just how motivated I was until like I look back and look at the videos and go, like that's crazy.
I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's a really gruelingly hard process to come back from something like that, and you have to really want it. and you need that motivation to really kind of push yourself, because like you say, it's hard, it's going to hurt, it's going to be draining, and if you need to have that kind of fire in the belly to really push yourself to get through it, to then get to the end goal of obviously returning to sport, or even returning to walking, unassisted. It's quite a difficult journey to get through.
I think having that goal is like massive though, and I think it's something like this happens. I think being an athlete is like, it's like a bit of a cheat code in a situation like this, because I think if you've played high level sports, having that mentality and having the ability to sort of, if you've got a goal as an athlete, you're going to be like motivated to go out there and grab it and go and get it. And I think the fact that I had that to look to, I'm not sure I would, if I wasn't playing football in the States, if I was just like living my life and maybe like playing casually on a weekend, I don't know, hindsight's a great thing, but I don't know if I would have had that level of motivation and stuff. Whereas with that motivation of, okay, if I can get back and play and go back to school in America and play at that level again, that would be pretty cool. So I think that level of determination and grit and self-belief as an athlete is really so important in a situation like mine.
Do you remember how long it was between, the day of the car crash to your first kind of training session with the team? The first time you were kicking balls with kind of teammates around, and in a kind of full training sense, rather than, like you say, training alone with cones. Do you remember how long that was?
So I went. They didn't know if I would even go back to university in August, and then I completed all of my spring classes while I was in hospital in the Shepherd Centre, and they were like what? Like that? I basically said like I'm in bed all day, like I've got nothing else to do. I might as well like get all this done. And so I ended up going back in August to university. So it's that just 5 months after the accident. So I came back and did a month home, and then went back. And to be fair, like when I went back, I was kicking it non-contact, and in pre-season everything's contact pretty much. So I would maybe do the warm up with the team. And then maybe do like a passing pattern, and then I'd be like, oh, I've got to go sit down now. That was like super deflating, because I didn't want to step out of the training session. Like I had a Petr Cech helmet, and I was like, I'm good to go. Like I know the surgeon said a year, but like 5 months is fine by me. Like please let me play. Unfortunately for me, I had sensible people around me that were like, no, go sit down now.
Yeah.
And then I think my first like contact training session, I didn't train contact the spring afterwards when it was like exactly a year, because we only had like a month left, and I thought it's fairly pointless like risking it now. Like if I wait until August when the actual season is around, I'll be completely. So I went back August of 2020. I went back to the surgeon that did the first surgery on my head where they took the skull out. He assessed me, asked me loads of questions, and he shook my hand and said, yeah, you're absolutely fine to go back and play contact football. What
was that moment like when he told you?
Cried a little bit, because like that confirmation was just like the first little bit of validation. Okay, that handshake was basically, congratulations, the hard work that you've put in over the last sort of year and a half is all going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And so I sort of bought all I still wear a like black protective headband now, like one that Raul Jimenez wore for Wolves.
Yeah.
I had the Petr Cech one, but when the sun's out, that thing's just impossible to play in. So, I took a photo with the surgeon, posted it, because like a lot of people had been following my story on like Instagram and stuff, on Facebook, like friends and family, and that was like a huge. I posted that, and I was like, "This is like the next chapter now." It's been a long first chapter of this book with getting sort of doing all this tedious rehab and medication, like seizure medication and stuff. And and that was like just so special, almost as special as the first time I actually played football again.
Yeah. And that brings you back to the question of, obviously football, especially contact sport, is such a kind of confidence-based sport, right? Obviously, you're going to have contact with other players, you're jumping up for headers, you're going into tackles and stuff. That first match back, how did you feel going into it? Obviously, you're balancing the excitement of, I'm playing a football match again, I can't wait to be there, but obviously there'll be a level of hesitancy around what happens if I go for a header, what happens if I collide another player. What was kind of going through your head on that first game back?
Well, the first game back was meant to be a month after I got signed off to play, and then COVID came along and said, "No, you can not play. You can not play for a little bit longer. It'll be worth the wait." So our season got cancelled and postponed to spring, where we'd usually be having an off season. So our conference, our league, basically said, "Okay, we're not going to have a full season because COVID's still kind of lingering a little bit." But we played against half the teams in our league, and they had like a little fake tournament at the end. It wasn't like, it didn't use up a year of eligibility, which was great, but like it gave us games to play. And so the first game, I remember it was away up in Tennessee. I had my two best friends behind me, Shane and Luke, who had been there in the hospital with me every single day until they're from Ireland and England. So like they flew home, but like first 4, 5, 6 weeks, they were basically inseparable from that hospital, which they'd been through the whole process with me. They'd experienced the lows and the highs, and I kind of looked in front of me and behind me, and they were both there. And I was like, "This is awesome! Like, this is so cool." I think we lost 1-0 or 2-1 or something, but like it didn't matter. I didn't care. Like I'd stepped onto the field. I was like a little bit nervous, and I was visualizing for weeks beforehand, stepping on the field and scoring and stuff like that. And that wasn't meant to be. I had to wait a few weeks for the first goal.
I was going to ask you when your first goal went in. That must have been a magical moment.
I think it was against a pretty terrible team to put us like 3-0 up or something. And I just remember the whole first half, the linesman was terrible. And like I got like 3 like decent through balls. A couple of them I was in my own half when the pass was played. And the linesman was like giving all of us offside, and it was crazy. And I just remember going into half time thinking, I'm not gonna score this goal. And then I scored a header from like the edge of the box that like looped over the keeper. It's like one of the worst goals ever. Like I look back at it and I go, how did that go in? But like you could see like the outburst of emotion straight away. Everyone was just like celebrating like crazy, and the changing room afterwards, we won the game and I'd scored, and everyone was just buzzing. Knew even the lads that weren't there through the whole hospital and stuff situation, they just heard about the story, and they knew like the magnitude of like the importance of that goal in my life, and like that was like the next like important milestone in like getting back to, because at that point I was still like I wasn't back to anywhere near like the level that I had been, but just everyone knew that as a striker, that first goal was just so important. And I only scored 1 all season because we had like 6 or 7 games, I think. But like that was a moment that I'd waited for almost 2 years, and it was just like the level of emotion was just out of this world.
I think that's such an important moment in terms of, it's that full circle, isn't it? In terms of from the start to the moment you not only back, but you're back scoring. I think the final question I've got for you is, obviously you've gone through all of this, be it the physical injuries, but also the mental time off and the mental strain of recovery and things like that. Coming out the other side, yourself now as a football player and as a kind of athlete, how do you think your game has changed? Not just obviously the physical side of maybe pace or physicality, but also how you view the game and how you approach games moving forward. How's that different than it was kind of pre-injury?
Sure. I think a lot of the mental change in my game has definitely come from more of a need for mental change from the changes in my body. So, for example, like quite a few years ago now, but like I had a bit more pace. I could maybe outrun like defenders and fullbacks and whatever. And I was a little bit stronger, maybe a little bit faster mentally. Now, because that's changed a little bit, I have to be way more adaptable. Like I've had to adapt my game, and I have to be way mentally smarter. For example, if I'm not going to outrun a centre back, okay, well, how can I time my movement a little bit better to have a head start on him while staying on side? And how can I, as a striker, I'm maybe not going to sprint past the centre back to get into like a good position to score. So it's about timing my movement to where I'm already in that position to score. I don't have to be relying on raw pace to get there. For example, I've never been rapid, but like I definitely lost a yard or two with all of the surgeries and stuff. Visualization is a big thing for me now as well, and that came from the car accident. To be honest, I sort of would every single day sat in the hospital bed would visualize, not even specific. When I'm working with athletes, I'm sort of when I'm teaching visualization and stuff, I'm sort of saying, like, look at specific movements and try and be as detailed as possible with your visualization. For me, it was just dreaming big. Like I've spoken to a load of injured athletes, and I think you've got to allow yourself to dream big. And that for me was letting myself, when I knew that was my goal, to come back and play soccer, well, you best believe I was dreaming every single day about that first goal, that first time stepping on the pitch, maybe winning a trophy. Like that was such a big motivation for me. Like if I was seeing that in my head, that was going to happen. So I'll be like I used to do it all the time, but like way more now. I'm before games, I'm visualizing myself sort of running through on goal and scoring a goal, and what celebration am I going to do? It's all for enjoyment. I just enjoy the sport. I have to be grateful for the fact that it very easily could have been gone like that. Whether it be like life itself or the ability to play football and stuff like that. I just have to be unbelievably grateful to be able to go out and play on a Saturday with my friends. Like it's amazing. I'm so, even when I have a bad game, it's hard to be annoyed at myself and hard to be like down, because like I've been able to play, and there's no other thing that beats that.
It's such a powerful shift, isn't it? When you actually just appreciate that you get to do what you love, rather than getting caught up on, we should have won that game, or I missed that chance, or whatever it was. But before I let you go, I've got one final question for you. And obviously your story is such an impressive one, such a powerful one. If you were speaking to someone who was in a position of, they've had a major injury, they're going to be out for 6 months, a year, 2 years, they're struggling in terms of potentially never coming back to the sport they love. After going through what you've been through, what would be your number one piece of advice for that person? If they're sitting in that hospital bed waiting for a surgery or recovering from an injury which may potentially sideline them for significant periods of time, potentially forever, if they can't come back from it, what would you say to them?
Sure. I think what I just spoke about is really important, and would be, I'm not sure that's the number one thing that helped me through, but just allowing yourself to dream big. Like, I mean, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because if you've been told by a surgeon, you have to balance it. If you've been told by a surgeon you're not going to play for a year or 18 months, whether you've had an ACL or something, it's not going to help you visualizing yourself playing next week.
Yeah.
However, like you have to be. I just think dreaming big is something that allowed me to take the small sort of process goals. That was I would dream of my big outcome goal, which was stepping back into football and playing again. But the fact that I was obsessed with it, and it was all I thought about, allowed me to sort of, okay, the physical therapist wants me to take 20 steps today, or something as small as that, I would look at that and go, maybe if I didn't have that big goal that I dreamed about, maybe I would have been like, nah, I'm not doing that today. I don't see how that's going to help me in the long run. Whereas because I had that sort of really big goal of getting back into it and getting back to sport, I think I viewed those smaller daily tasks as just necessary levels that I had to complete to get to the final stage.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the most important one for me in my situation, and I think it would be really beneficial for all athletes struggling with either injury or time off from sport, is keeping a really positive social circle. And I don't mean like an enormous social circle where you've got loads of different opinions and influences. I'm talking about like a positive social circle, which could be one person, it could be 5 people, friends, family. But the most important thing for me there was that sort of everyone was pushing me in the right direction, and everyone had the same mentality where there's not one person pulling this way and pushing that way and trying to sort of drag me in different directions. Everyone was positive and everyone was keeping me on task, knew which direction that I wanted to go, and were kind of lifting me up in that direction rather than sort of, they were encouraging me. They were, if I was, for example, if my uncle was sat in the room in the hospital and they hadn't put my piece of skull back in yet, and we were watching the Leicester versus Ajax game where Lucas Moura scored a hat-trick to send them through, and he scored with the last kick of the game. And I stood up out of the hospital bed and started jumping around with socks on a slippy hospital floor with no helmet on. And he grabbed me and just dragged me back into the bed. He was like, no, whether it be encouragement or telling you no and stopping you from doing stuff that are going to push you back 5 steps when everyone's been pushing you forward 10. I think that was super important for me, just having that really positive, influential social circle with my mum, my dad, my uncle, my whole family, and then my friends that were there. Just everyone being that positive influence and keeping me on track.
No, great advice. I think that's important for so many different walks of life. But no, thank you for today. I think it's really such a fascinating story and also such a powerful message. You know, people go through injuries at different levels, you know, every day, not necessarily to the same, you know, extreme level as your kind of tough recovery, but it's such a powerful thing to see someone to be able to come back from such a difficult challenge and come back, you know, thrive in their sport and play competitively again and get back to enjoying it. So thank you for sharing that. No,
thank you for having me on it. It's I love to talk about it because there's definitely some lessons, whatever walk of life you're in, whether it be get in a car, put your seatbelt on, or injured athlete, or just general like positive thinking and positive mentality. Yeah, I think it would be a waste if I didn't use the story to help people.
Yeah, I know. I think there's so much value for people to learn from this kind of thing. But no, thank you for your time, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Before you go, I want to share a great resource for any coach, the SP Coaching Journal. It's designed to help any coach of any discipline or sport reflect on their sessions and maximise the improvement of their athletes. If you want to find out more about this resource, check out the link in the bio. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.